600 years before the United Nations created the World Food Program. The Ottoman Empire had already solved the problem the World Food Program was built to address. They solved it with grain, with architecture, and with a bureaucratic system so sophisticated that modern food security economists are still studying it as a model. Almost nobody outside academic Ottoman history departments knows this, and that ignorance is costing lives. The Ottoman Empire at its peak governed approximately 25 to 30 million people across 3 continents: Southeastern Europe, Anatolia, the Arab world, and North Africa. Feeding this population was not a passive administrative afterthought. It was an active, funded, architecturally expressed state priority that the Ottomans treated with the same institutional seriousness they gave to military organization or religious administration. The food security infrastructure they built was not a response to famine. It was a preemptive system designed to prevent famine from occurring in the first place. A distinction that separates reactive charity from structural governance, and that the 21st century is still struggling to understand. The central institution of Ottoman food security was the imarethane, the imperial soup kitchen. But calling it a soup kitchen is like calling the Library of Congress a bookshelf. The Ottoman imarethane was a fully funded, architecturally grand, permanently staffed public institution attached to every major mosque complex. It fed the poor, the traveler, the student, the widow, the orphan, and the government official traveling on state business. Daily, without application, without discrimination, and without charge. The great imperial complexes, Topkapi, the Suleymaniye. The complexes built by Suleiman the Magnificent across Istanbul, Edirne, and Jerusalem, each contained an imarethane as a core component, not an optional appendage. The feeding of the population was architecturally built into the DNA of imperial power. The imarethane system was sustained by the waqf, the Islamic charitable endowment. A waqf was a legal instrument by which property, land or money was permanently dedicated to a charitable purpose and made legally inalienable. It could not be sold, confiscated, or redirected. Sultans, viziers, wealthy merchants, and religious scholars all established waqfs to fund imarethanes, and the accumulated endowments created a food distribution network with an independent financial base that did not depend on annual government budget allocations or the political will of any particular ruler. The system had inertia. It continued because the legal architecture compelled it to continue, but the imarethane was only the distribution end of a much larger system. The foundation was grain storage. The Ottomans built an empire-wide network of state granaries, the zahire ambarları, that operated on a principle modern food security economists call strategic reserves. Grain was purchased at above-market prices during surplus years, stored in climatically appropriate stone and brick granaries across the empire, and released at below-market prices during shortage years. The price differential was absorbed by the state treasury. The granaries were not profit centers. They were insurance policies. Public infrastructure designed to flatten the price spikes and supply shortages that caused famine in pre-industrial economies, with no other mechanism for managing harvest variability. The sophistication of the system went further. The Ottomans maintained separate granaries for different purposes: military supply, civilian relief, seed preservation, and emergency reserves. The seed preservation component is worth pausing on specifically. In years of severe shortage when civilian populations were consuming their seed grain, destroying next year's harvest to survive this year's, the Ottoman system maintained separate protected reserves of seed grain that could not be consumed regardless of how severe the current crisis became. This is the precautionary logic that the United Nations Svalbard Global Seed Vault embodies today. The principle that some reserves must be structurally protected from short-term crisis consumption to preserve long-term agricultural capacity. The Ottomans operationalized this principle in the 15th century. The administrative apparatus that managed all of this was the grain administration, a specialized bureaucracy with provincial offices across the empire reporting to the central treasury in Istanbul. It monitored harvest conditions, projected supply shortfalls, authorized granary releases, regulated grain prices in urban markets, prevented hoarding by merchants, and coordinated relief distributions across provincial boundaries when a shortage in one region could be addressed by surplus from another. This is the functional description of what the UN Food and Agriculture Organization does today. The Ottomans were doing it with quill pens and horseback messengers 600 years earlier. The results were measurable. Major famines in Ottoman-controlled territories were significantly less frequent and less severe than in comparable European states during the same period. While France, England, and the German states experienced repeated catastrophic famines through the 17th and 18th centuries, The kind of demographic disasters that killed 10 to 20% of regional populations. The Ottoman core territories showed a notably different pattern. This was not geography or luck. It was policy, it was architecture, it was grain. The system began to break down in the 19th century as the Ottoman Empire lost territory, accumulated debt to European creditors, and was pressured into free trade agreements, the capitulations, that undermined its ability to regulate grain markets and maintain price stability. The 1873 Anatolian famine, the 1879 famine, and the catastrophic conditions of World War I all occurred in a context where the Ottoman grain reserve system had been progressively dismantled by the same structural adjustment logic that the IMF would later impose on developing nations in the 20th century. Open markets, remove price controls, eliminate state intervention. The Ottoman treasury sold off the granaries. The waqfs were reorganized and their revenues redirected. The imarethane were privatized or closed. The famine followed. In 2026, the World Food Program feeds approximately 160 million people annually across 120 countries. It does so reactively, responding to crises after they emerge, managing shortfalls after harvests fail, distributing aid after prices spike beyond what poor populations can afford. The Ottoman system was designed to prevent the conditions the WFP responds to from occurring. The difference between prevention and response is the difference between governance and charity. And the difference in cost is enormous. Prevention is always cheaper than the emergency response it makes unnecessary. The grain reserves the Ottomans built across 3 continents were not a gift from powerful rulers to grateful subjects. They were a social contract expressed in architecture and law. The state had obligations. Those obligations were funded, institutionalized, and made legally durable through the waqf system so that no future ruler could simply choose not to honor them. The modern food security crisis, 828 million people undernourished in 2022 according to the UN's own figures, is not primarily a production problem. The world produces enough food to feed its population. It is a distribution, storage, and political will problem. The Ottomans solved the distribution and storage problem 6 centuries ago and embedded the political will in law so that individual rulers could not opt out. The solution to the problem we cannot solve was built in stone and brick across 3 continents. Between the 14th and 19th centuries. Then the creditors came and told the empire to sell it.